Hey, how's everybody doing? Mike here at the Limo Garage. Today we're at the new and improved Limo Garage. So if you guys have been following along the last year or so, you'll know that we went through quite a transition period from one building to not having a building to now. This is our new facility that we're happy to say that we're finally here and moved in. 3,600 square feet, plenty of room for my equipment, limos, and everything that needs to be done. That being said, now it's time to get to the meat and potatoes of what I'm working on today. This is our 2014 Dodge Charger limousine built by Pinnacle, and it's got that wonderful 3.6 liter V6 engine that everybody loves. Well, I'm doing this because I've got a nasty oil leak. So what you're looking at here is an updated version of Chrysler's screw up. Okay, this is where your oil filter goes. That's the oil filter housing and the oil cooler. On this engine, that's mounted underneath the plenum and intake manifold. So I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see it, but that valley down there is full of oil because this entire unit is plastic. And well, over the years of hot, cold expansion stuff while we're in there, including valve cover gaskets, as if you can see down in there, side of that cylinder head is a little bit damp from oil as well. So if this is a project that you guys are going to take on, I recommend this is the updated, improved one. We're going to do the thermostat housing while we're in there. This also comes with new bolts, all the gaskets that you're going to need to put it back together. Now, this is the time to change out coils and plugs. I got Champion plugs, and I've got a really high quality set of coils. I couldn't justify the cost of the Mopars, especially nowadays where they all come off the same Chinese assembly line. So I just got a high quality aftermarket coil that I have faith in. I've also got everything that we need here to do our valve cover gaskets and all the seals associated with it. Now's a good time also to think about changing out any idler pulleys, belts, or your tensioner while you're in there. You're going to have the motor taken apart. Now's the time to do it. All right, so I'm not going to bore you guys with more of my gabbing, and certainly not going to show you a video of taking this thing apart, but I'll be sure to take some pictures of this and I'll add it as a slideshow into this video so you guys can see how the project goes and where we end up when we're done. I'm not expecting to have this done in one day. I've got a lot of things going on here. I'm going to do my best, but I will be sure to update as we go through this project. All right, so once again, check it out. The new Limo Garage. Really excited to be here. My wife and I busted our asses getting this place set up. It took us almost a solid 4 to 5 weeks to move everything, get set up and organized so that we could actually operate out of here. And the next thing that's going to be coming, hopefully, actually 2 things are coming. We're going to be putting in a big ass fan, 15-foot fan. That's going to keep this place cool in the summer. We are in Florida, guys. And then after that, the Limo Garage is finally getting a lift. Putting one right here. Oh yeah. So just a quick tip while you're doing a job like this, get stuff out of the way, okay? Don't try to be the superhero and say, I don't have to remove that, I can get around it. Make your life easier for the amount of time it's gonna take to remove what's in your way. So you'll notice I've got the whole air intake out of the way. I'll be pulling this air box out. I've also taken both wiper arms off, which if you've never done that, it's super easy. All you have to do is just take off the nut that's on the top of the post, spray a little bit of WD-40 in there, and then lightly put the nut back on, just hand tight, and then take a little mallet, I'm not talking about a dead blow, little mallet, and you just tap the top of that, pull on the wiper arm, and it'll pop right off. So I already popped both wiper arms off. I'm going to take this whole cowl out and the support bar, and that's just going to open this up so much easier to get to everything that we need to get to, and I don't have to try to be a superhero and say, I did it without taking that out. You know what? I got enough gray hairs already. I'm taking that shit out. So we've got our cross brace out now, and that's the brace that was right there at the cowl where the wiper transmission is. This is it right here. So the only thing you got to watch out for when you're taking this thing out, this little bracket right here goes right up underneath the wiper motor, and you can see there's just a little rubber bushing here, and you just got to kind of pull on that and it'll pop right out. You don't have to take out the wiper transmission, just slide this out. There's also a harness that's stuck here, and you'll also have a wiring harness that's stuck up underneath here. which is this one right here. So just pop that off so you don't do any damage to your wiring. And then after you take out the bolts on each side, you got 2 bolts on each side. Take this out, set it aside, and now you can see how much room we have to access everything. So if you've never done a project like this before, I have a couple of suggestions for you. First of all, don't get overwhelmed. Don't be afraid to take pictures and document everything that you take off as you go, so you have reference to get back to at a later time when you put it back together. So what I've always done in the past that works for me is I'll start at one end and I'll just work my way around. And any hoses, plugs, connections, anything, one at a time, just work your way around. Take your time doing it. Don't damage anything. These plugs have little locks on them. So you can see these little tabs here. Those are safety locks so that they don't come unplugged. A lot of them have little red tabs on them. So you have to slide this red tab out first before this will come unplugged. So don't just start yanking on this thing. This tab slides down, then you can push this in and unplug it. So you've got a bunch of plugs on the throttle body, and you're gonna run into a few more as you go. Also a couple of sensors on top of the valve covers as well, and then your coils. But as you work your way around, you know, just take off one thing at a time. Don't be afraid to take pictures and document it as you go. And then once you get everything apart, you're not going to be as overwhelmed when it comes time to put it back together. After you've gone around and made sure you've got everything disconnected, that's also going to include these 2 little brackets that are right here on the side. They actually wrap right around the valve cover and go right up to the plenum. So you got one here with a 10mm bolt, well, 10mm nut. Same thing here. And what I've done is I've taken the bolt out of the bottom here, but you've got a stud that's way down here on this bracket, and I was able to loosen it up enough that this fell back and it actually released itself so that I'll be able to get the plenum off. Now, as far as taking the plenum off, you've got a couple of screws here. I need a flashlight holder. Here. Now the ones that are down here in these holes, you can't get a regular socket in there, so get yourself a T20 and you're going to get down in there and get all those out. And then you've got one here, and back here as well. So once you've got all those screws out, just give it a little shake. Yep, she's loose. Don't go yanking on anything. This thing's plastic and it's going to be really expensive to replace if you break something or if you leave something still connected. So if you've taken all that stuff off, like I believe I have, should be able to lift this thing right up out of the off of the engine. You should. And there we go. And that's how you get your upper intake plenum off. Now to get this lower intake off, you're also going to have to disconnect all the connections for your fuel injectors and also for the coils, both sides, and they've all got these little red locking tabs. So just use a little pick. Like I like to use this one that's got a little 90-degree angle on it, and you can slide these little red things out, and then that will allow you to put your thumb down in here, push the button, and pull it out. So just be careful. Same deal on here. These don't have the little red thing on them, but all you got to do is just push down on the end and just pull, or put a little thing here while you're pushing on that and just pop that out. They'll all come out pretty easy. You do also have to take the fuel line off on this because the fuel rail is going to be coming off with that intake, and Chrysler uses a returnless system, so you're only going to have one fuel line. So right here, it's just a quick disconnect. Squeeze that. I recommend putting a rag over it to protect your eyes. That may be pressurized when you're doing that. And I just take the line and set it up here, out of sight, out of the way. It's just kind of stuck right up there between the transmission arm and the firewall. So now all we have left to do is just set the harnesses aside, take all these screws out, and we should be able to pop this lower intake off. Also, while you're doing this, please shove some rags or something in here. If you guys drop something down in there, you're gonna have to get a magnet and go fishing. You might even end up taking the heads off. Don't want to have to do that shit. Once you guys are ready to start taking all these screws out, grab yourself, don't use power tools. All right, so grab yourself 1/4-inch drive, not too much torque, 8mm, and you got screws all the way around. Do not take out these big ones. They hold the fuel rail on. The fuel rail is going to stay attached to the lower intake manifold. Now take your time when you're taking these screws out, because you've got a cheap screw going into aluminum. So what happens with that? Oxidation. So I had two of them that gave me trouble. This one right here and the one back here. Gave me a little bit of trouble. They were tough coming out. So take your time, grab a little bit of WD-40, squirt it down there, and work those bolts up and down until you have no resistance. If you start feeling resistance, stop. You snap that bolt off, your weekend is going to be pretty shitty, spending it with a drill bit and a nightmare. So take your time taking all these screws out. Once they're all out, you should be able to just grab this intake and lift it right off and come up in one piece. There you go. So there's your intake. It's time to take out our oil filter adapter that is actually a one-piece unit with the oil cooler on it. Make sure you unplug the two plugs down here. You've got two sensors, so unplug those and just set the wires aside. And you've got a couple of screws that need to come out, and they are the inverted Torx. So you can see like this one right down here. You're not going to be taking these out because they stay in there. This stays as one unit, but to unbolt it from the engine, you've got a couple inverted Torx all the way around. You can actually reference your new part to see where all the screw holes are so you know which ones to take out. You're going to need a special tool for this. Like I said, it's an inverted Torx and it's an E8. So it's one of these little goofy looking things here right there. If you don't have an extensive tool collection, you can probably run down to the nearest Harbor Freight and grab a set of these for about 10 bucks. There is also a heater hose for the heat exchanger that goes right into the bottom of this housing. So you're going to have to remove that heater hose as well. I do recommend spending the time and the money to get one of these little tools here. You could probably order one on Amazon for like 20 bucks. And that's going to make getting that hose clamp off a heck of a lot easier. Then just get a little hose tool. That way you can get that hose out of there. So as you can see, we have removed it finally. So I'm going to make one strong suggestion that I probably should have done before I took this off. Drain the coolant before you take that thing out. Yes, because what happens is this valley fills up with coolant like you wouldn't believe. Your drain, well, you can't see it from here. It's way the hell down there for your radiator. Put a bucket under it, let it drain. Take your overflow cap off to let the air in. Once that's done draining, then go ahead and pull this thing off. This is the driver's side valve cover. It actually goes this way. So when you're taking this off, you have a whole bunch of little bolts all the way around. And you've got one here and one back here that's going to require a deep socket or a semi-deep socket. I unplugged all the sensors. Now I also marked with some blue tape this sensor here and the plug, because it looked to me like when the harness went back on it would be easy to mix them up. So a piece of tape here and on the coinciding plug so we don't have that problem. Now after you get all your screws out, don't try pulling on this thing because it's not going to come off. You also have to take out this little screw right here and loosen that, because that actually goes down into the valve cover and connects to one of the brackets on the head. So you do have to loosen that. And then just very, very carefully work this thing off. Don't put too much pressure on it. It is made out of plastic. It's not going to take much to break this thing. So we're going to go ahead and take the other side off. And you guys can see where we're at now. Looking like fun, isn't it? Now when you guys go to take these valve covers off, you'll remember earlier I mentioned that you had to make sure you take these screws out here, and same thing on the other one. However, also on the passenger side, there's a breather that sticks out of the back side of the valve cover next to the firewall. This is it right here, and it's got two little screws here. I think those were two T20s if I remember right. But anyways, if you do not remove this, you will not be able to remove the valve cover, because this right here sticks into that valve cover far enough that it actually overlaps the end of one of the camshafts. So make sure you remove this before you go yanking on that valve cover. So you guys can see here I've got everything pretty much cleaned up. All my surfaces are nice and clean, so I can put the intake back on, Also for my valve cover gaskets as well. Now don't go in here with a grinder and start doing that. You're going to put all that debris inside the engine. Not good for it. Get yourself a nice little scrubby pad, little Scotch pad or something like that. And some of these towels that they get at AutoZone work great. A little bit of brake cleaner. Just go around, wipe everything clean, all your surfaces. Also, you're going to note on this corner here, the lower corner, and here, there's going to be a dab of silicone. Make sure that when you put your valve covers back on, you'd be sure to put some oil resistant high temp silicone, just a little drop here, and like I said, down in the bottom corner here. Same thing on the other side, or you may have a little bit of oil seepage out of there that you don't want to deal with. We had to go a little bit further on this project. I had to take the secondary alternator out. I noticed some wiring that I didn't like, but that's all back together. I've got my new belt, tensioner, the hose is back in. You'll also notice I put this little protective sleeve here because the hose sits kind of close to my second alternator bracket. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm going to start cleaning up some stuff and getting ready to put this on. This is our new housing. It comes pre-assembled. I actually got this, believe it or not, on Amazon for like 130 bucks. So it comes pre-assembled. It's already got your sensors, comes with a filter in it. You've already got all your O-rings in place. When you put this down, put a little bit of, do not put silicone on these. A little bit of dielectric grease. That way they're nice and smooth and slick when they go down, and it'll seat really well. It does also come with new bolts. So I'm going to Now don't you guys go getting lazy on me when it comes time for these valve covers. Make sure you're changing out these seals right here for where your spark plug holes are. Kind of destroyed that one on its way out. But if you get a good valve cover set, it'll come with the new seals. It'll come with all the seals that you need for everything on this thing. So don't skimp out. Do it the right way. You'll thank yourself later. This is the tool you want to use right here for pulling out the seals. And when you go to put in the new one, just grab a socket that fits the exact same size. That way you can just line it right up, grab a light hammer, and you can tap it in. Go to put your valve cover on. These gaskets don't require any kind of sealant at all, except for, like I said, you're going to put a little bit of silicone there and a little bit of silicone there, and that's it. But here's a cool little trick that you want to do. All the way around this, except for the points where your silicone is going to hit, put some dielectric grease, a nice thin layer of dielectric grease. And what that's going to do, it's going to ensure that when you push this down on top of the cylinder head, that this gasket is not going to get hung up or bind in any way, and it's going to be a smooth transition onto the head. It's going to lay perfectly flat and seal perfectly. Don't go gooping this whole thing up with silicone. So we've got the passenger side valve cover back on now. One thing that you guys need to know when you're putting these valve covers back on, this is plastic. So don't go whipping this thing together with an air tool or something stupid like that, because you're going to crack the shit out of it. So when you're putting it on, you got to have kind of an angle. This end's got to go in first, and then it'll sit down in place. Be patient with it, you'll get it down. But once you get it situated so that you can start putting all your bolts back in, and when it's time to tighten them, do it in a crisscross. So you don't want to tighten them all the way down. It's going to take about 5 passes to get them all down. So crisscross it. Boom, 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 and so on to the outer edges. And then come back again. Crisscross, okay? Always do it that way. That way it's going to lay it down nice and flat on both sides. Take your time. Like I said, about 5 passes around doing that, and you're going to get a nice seal, and you're not going to crack, damage, or ruin anything, or cause yourself one hell of a freaking headache. Also, don't forget to tighten this down here, and don't forget to put your breather back on in the back. So of course this job wouldn't make sense without changing out the plugs and coils. Now's the time to do it. So a quick little trick that I like to do when I'm swapping out coils, dielectric grease is your friend, okay? So they don't put any of that stuff on these things from the factory. So what I do is I actually tear the boot right off, and I put a little drop of dielectric grease in here, and a little dielectric grease at the bottom where the spark plug goes, and that's going to keep from any corrosion from one building at the end where the spark plug is, and it's going to keep any corrosion from building up where your contact is right here at the bottom of a lot of progress. We've already swapped out the spark plugs, put in new coils. I showed you guys that little trick to do with the dielectric grease. Trust me, you're going to thank me for that. So now before I go putting the rest of this all back together, now is a good time to put your fluids in. So obviously drain the oil, let it drain for a good long time, refill the oil. I also recommend pouring some of the oil right through here. That way you're going to have less of a chance of a dry engine startup. So pour about a quart, maybe 2 quarts oil in here, then fill up the rest. Now as far as your coolant goes, obviously you want to do a 50-50 mix. Use a real good quality, long life antifreeze. Now, you'll notice that my antifreeze level is only down to here. Well, just a second ago, it was up to here. So these systems are a bitch to bleed. So what you want to do is make sure you take your bleeder out, get your 50-50 mixed coolant, and fill this thing up, walk away. Because what's going to happen is gravity is going to take over and get that coolant down into where it needs to go. And hopefully it's going to push all the air right out of that little vent that you took the plug out of on your thermostat housing. And hopefully you did what I did and put in a new thermostat. So now I'm going to go around, double check the back here, see if there's any vacuum lines that need to be replaced, hose clamps that need to be tightened. Now's the time to do it. And we're going to go ahead and start putting the plenum back together on this thing. And I'll show you guys some pictures as it comes together. So remember when I told you guys to put the coolant in, take your bleeder screw out while you're working on the rest of this, putting it together? Well, it definitely pays off. Because as you can see, we've already got fluid coming up right up to the top of where our bleeder screw goes. You can see right here, there's coolant there now, and I've already put almost 2 full gallons in that, and I've had to refill it once. So that means our system is almost 100% full just by gravity. All right, so there you have it, she's running. So like I had mentioned before about taking care of your fluids earlier, that definitely made a big difference. You still want to keep a screwdriver handy and a bucket underneath it, because you're going to have to bleed that screw just a little bit more. So what I've done is I went ahead and started it up. I've got a fan in front of it. I've got the front I've got the front defrost turned on and the rear heat. Now the reason that I did that, by turning on the front defrost, that's also going to force it to not only have the heat, it's also going to force the radiator fan to come on, because whenever you use defrost, it's always going to activate the compressor. That's just to get rid of humidity in the car. So that way this thing won't heat up too fast. And by turning on the heat in the rear, that's going to turn on the electric pump, help circulate that coolant, get it going to the back, make sure we get all of our air out of this thing. So right now it's running great. It started right up, no noises, nice and smooth. Checking on the dash. Temperature's still normal, no check engine light. And I also double checked, that's our secondary battery there. The main one is still in the trunk. I double checked our charging system. I forgot to show you guys this earlier. See this? That was what was left of the main wire to the secondary alternator. Way too small, very inefficient for what's in here. So we got rid of that, upgraded it to a nice heavy duty cable, and I just double checked my charging system. It's working perfectly. So that's the cable that I put in there now. It's what it should have came with in the first place. I mean, come on. Really? And this car was built by Pinnacle, supposed to be one of the best in the industry. Sorry guys, that's a fail. So anyways, that pretty much wraps it up, guys. This was a long video. If you stuck around long enough to watch this, then that probably means you've got enough patience to do this job on your own. I probably skipped a couple of steps while I was putting this thing back together and tearing it down. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below or shoot me a message. Anything I can do to help to save you guys money and make your lives a little bit easier, I am always happy to help. Again, thanks for watching and following along. Mike here at the Limo Garage. We'll see you guys next time.